JSON parser network error expecting value line 755 column 1 char 4147. Let's talk about Ysgramor. Truly talk, not just the roaring songs the med hall boasts, the carved idols of a bearded giant splitting the sea itself. We know that story etched into every Nod child's mind before they can hold a practiced sword. The first man, the harbinger, the bringer of justice against the treacherous elves. But what if we scrape away the centuries of praise, the layers of skaldic poetry thick as glacier ice? What do we find underneath? The man behind the myth might surprise you. Picture this Genesis. You need a founding spirit, right? Especially after you've carved a hard-won home amidst alien snows and hostile MERICILESS becomes more than a man-haze, frozen into a symbol. Human dominion manifest, shore-walking Nern. He becomes conquest itself, that divine right to claim this land, Skyrim forever. Nah. But how did that happen? Think about it. Those first stories weren't written down on vellum. They were shouted around driftwood fires in new vulnerable settlements passed down by skalds whose job wasn't cold history, but survival, unity, heroism measured in giants felled, and elven strongholds shatter every retelling. Exaggerations grew details. Blurred singular acts became godlike feats. That's the nature of epic poetry, our shared memory. It builds monuments, not portraits. And speaking of foundations, how shaky is the ground beneath the very start? Atmora froze. We're told a noble exodus seeking fertile lands. But Atmora, cold, yes, but only ice. Dig deeper, fragments, suggestions perhaps of something darker, or the ancestors driven out, not by creeping frost, but by creeping fierce civil wars sparked by scarce resources and endless pressure squeezing a people desperate for space, any space, at massive organized landing. Two ships, the Ilgermut and the Harrick, carrying the entirety of the future Nordic race. Please, it stretches credulity thinner, an ancient parchment. Small bands, perhaps individual migrations over decades, finding footholds, trading silently with strange pally locals. That feels real, a slow build-up to conflict, not a single heroic splash on to the shore, which brings us to the peace. So they tell you there was a fragile peace before the betrayal. Humans huddled in Saarthal, elves eyeing them from afar. But what was that peace? Was it genuine mutual tolerance, or merely the heavy silent indifference of a far older power towards best? Or maybe it was a pressure cooker of fear and misunderstanding. The elves knew this land intimately, possessed magics humans hadn't dreamed of. The settlers clung to traditions of a lost home. Suspicion simmered. Maybe the elves saw a growing tide. Maybe the settlers pushed boundaries sacred to Falmer, at shattering stone theory, a nod cracking some focal point of ancient snow elf belief that feels plausible. A catalyst born of ignorance or defiance. Was the night of tears truly a bolt from the blue on innocent settlers, or was it tragically a brutal response, a preemptive strike by elves terrified of being overwhelmed? It makes the horror no less, but it reframes it. It wasn't pure motiveless malice incarnate. It was panic, fear, perhaps even their own survival instinct roaring against a perceived existential threat. History is rarely black and white, even painted in blood. Then comes the return, vengeance, purification. 500 glorious companions, led by the Colossus Ysgramor, yielding Wuuthrad itself, a cleaver made for giants and elven kindred. Such a neat, powerful number, 500, an army marching in perfect unison, or a gathering myth more likely. Scattered remnants of settlers, survivors, newer arrivals from Atmora, stirred by tales, hardened adventurers, smelling opportunity, all coalescing over time under the banner of a formidable, wrathful leader, Ysgramor was real likely gifted a brilliant war lore, but he rallied warbands allies of convenience. Desperate souls, they weren't 500 demigods descending from the sky. They were hard men with sharp edges fueled by rage and loss. And the conquest, O Nod, listen. The songs glorify the battles, the great victories against wicked Mer, but history, true history, smells of smoke clinging to burnt villages long after the warriors have marched on. It hears the choked silence where children's laughter used to be. The return wasn't just battlefield clashes, it swept villages away. Snow elf farming, families hiding in their sod houses, elves caught behind, unable to flee, whole settlements, erased people, driven deep into caves they'd never escaped, twisted over ages, until they became the Falmer horrors, and the land itself torn. Forests burned, sacred mere places ground, the dust under gnawed boots. That's not heroism, that's brutal, total war. That's genocide. We sanitize it with every verse sung about cleansing the land. Those verses bury the scream. So why does the legend endure? Why polish the myth? Because it gave birth to a nation. Not it gave people an identity, a purpose forged strong as Skyrim steel. Ysgramor became more than a man. He became the reason Skyrim stands, the justification for Nordic dominance. Empires needed that story. Think Tiber Septime. Talos himself wrapped his ambitions in the mantle of the Nod paragon. He invoked the companions, the legacy of Ysgramor's conquest to cement his rule over Tamriel. Ysgramor, the symbol, whispers, elves betrayed us. Elves are the eternal threat. That narrative justified imperial subjugation of elven lands. It fuels Ulfric xenophobia centuries later. See how convenient it remains. Look around Saarthal now. Dig if you dare. Archaeologists poke stones. Where are the mass graves implied by the night of terrors? Where's the undeniable proof of this cataclysmic founding battle? The evidence is quiet, ambiguous. Was someone here before even the first waves of Nod migrants? Were settlers intermingling, trading, sharing sacred sites? The heroic isolated narrative starts to crack like poorly mixed mortar. History loves to be written by the winners, especially when it empowers those now ruling. We need our myths. Perhaps they bind us, give us courage in the cold dark. But maybe not. We can hold to truths. We can honor the legacy, the fierce spirit Ysgramor represents, the sheer will that carved a homeland out of perilous wilds, while acknowledging the probable truth, a truth likely painted in mud and blood and desperation, not gleaming gold. A complicated history of misunderstandings, brutal realities, and horrific violence committed by both sides that doesn't diminish Skyrim. It makes its rocky foundations forged in fire and frost and human passion more remarkable. That's the man behind the myths, not a flawless giant, but a leader forged in desperate times, whose story he reshaped over centuries to tell ourselves who we are, and sometimes who we wish we weren't. See him now, not bronze iron scarred. Real walk with me across this cold stone plain near Winterold. Buried beneath that jagged rim lies Saarthal, slit open like a gutted whale by the college excavation. Those unearthed walls, the last things many Nords saw before the Snow Elves turned slaughter into the night of terror. Stand here, feel that unnatural chill radiating from below. That's more than mountain air. That's the malice of ancient betrayal seeping from the rock. Can you picture it? Fire bursting through the dark elven blades in moonlight, the panic cries swallowed by blizzard winds. Ysgramor fought desperately toward the sea of ghosts, and deep in the guts of it Tolfter's students stumbled upon the reason the elves risked annihilation. The Eye of Magnus still hums with stolen power down there, pulsing like a buried heart. Proof the horror wasn't just slaughter. 'Twas about stopping something incomprehensible. A father's grief carved a tomb out of the coast, east of Windhelm. Head there now, feel the salted wind clawing at you. That's Engel's barrow, his ship wrecked by the ghost sea of Ysgramor's fleet, pressing on to build an empire. While he buried his firstborn, the tomb itself is timeless bitterness, heavy with sorrow, and sea spray the jagged rock formations, shielding it like petrified waves frozen. The moment they tore Engel's hull open, find his helm within feels clammy, doesn't it? Eternal damp, it speaks louder than any saga of the price paid immediately after Saarthal, before Windhelm's first foundation stone was ever laid. This isn't just a barrow, it's a scar of pure undiluted loss, stamped into the earth. Slap the cold water of the White River hits the quays as we approach the stone quarters. See how Windhelm feels, anchored permanent, each mammoth block in Ysgramor's palace. The core beneath the modern mess radiates grim purpose. This wasn't just a settlement, it was his warship, made manifest upon the land. Every corridor a calculated defense, every high window an arrow slit facing the conquered wilderness. Feel the weight of strategy in this stone. It's formidable, uncompromising, just like him. Then step inside the ancient hall of the dead, that pervasive silence, heavy centuries beneath layers of later tombs. The companions whispered lies. Ysgramor himself, they didn't consign him to some forgotten barrow haze. Here, deep under flagstones trodden by kings, it speaks volumes. Being gnawed meant staying close to your shield, brother. Your victory cries echoing against the same stone walls housing your forebears. Go to the harbor's edge, where the statue of Talos stands proud. Bare feet, Falk, Firebeard, and solitude speaks true. Talos deliberately placed his conquering boots precisely where Ysgramor's ship struck land, millennia before history, stacking upon history, conquest justifying conquest. And remember Jorviskr, that great mead hall, and a Whiterun began its journey lashed to the hull of one of these ships, carrying Ysgramor's vengeance. How fitting it ended up there forever, watching over the plains from its honored place, just like Windhelm guards the port. A Jorviskr itself smell the roasting meat mingled with ancient timber. That's not oak set, that's centuries of spilled blood, spilled mead, countless oaths sworn over those warp and woof planks. Run your fingers along the massive beams, smooth now worn by touch and time. Touch deep within the grain, you feel the salty bite of the ghost sea. Sprays prow mounted proudly out back, that wasn't decoration over 3,000 years past, that would slice through waves bearing Ysgramor's wrath. Frightening thought, it transformed conquest, burned low, simmered into institution. From warlord's flagship to revered hall for lesser warriors, well, lesser in glory, not always in fighting spirit. Irland's hammer rings outside by the Skyforge, the air tasting of hot iron and slay that forged fire much older, and the hall was burning when Jorviskr arrived. The mountain waited, another anchor point laid down with the ship. Then there is Wuuthrad, its fragments fuel hungry. Cold steel shouldn't crave, but those reforged chunks hold one. If there's a vicious hum beneath the metal, a vibration like a trapped storm. Its original heft, it could shatter a shield, and an elf skull behind it. In one blow the shards scattered across Solstheim. Each one radiates echoes of old battles. Its power against elves isn't a myth etched in some dusty tome. Its palpable, brutal finality lives inside the axe, finding the fragments isn't an Aaron, it's gathering whispers of genocide, tying Ysgramor's direct will back together. Through painful effort, look beneath Whiterun, keep inside Dustman's cairn, smell the stale air thick with ancient decay, see the companions buried deep. Here you touch brotherhood, solidified through bone and burial rites, see their axes resting near withered bones, that worn handle grain someone sweated to hold, that fought beside shield brothers with it died defending them, its intimate mortality, or elsewhere decaying ancestral gnawed helmets found beside elven blade snap over a knee conquest, forcing its way into the landscape. Tomb by tomb Ysgramor didn't wander, he planted his banner hard angles. Barrow on Windhelm's coast, Tanker Point east marked the Skyforge, and Whiterun wasn't just convenient. Jorvisker washed ashore near because that fire already blazed a beacon for territorial claim. Each companion became a legend with their cairns, literally defining the holds. Seek Jeek of the river atop Sheer Point, his barrow sits high, commanding cold views. Fight the dragon, brave the barrow pressure plates, feel the reverence in the stones. Jeek wasn't forgotten. Haze literally built into the mountain top, a constant territorial marker. Then the dragon priest shivering inside full host, that fortress Birchidons, the devastation to sudden endless skeletons guarded by dragon priest Rage. That devastation speaks of implosion. Were they burning, starving? Was a conflict between this entrenched cult and Ysgramor's newly arrived companion so fierce it shattered their world? Labyrinthians, staggering ruined dragon priest Morkate trap for eternity, his prison built atop structures bearing companion masonry styles. The conflict happened, the companions claw land away, not just from elves, but potentially shattered the dragon cult's hold on Skyrim itself. Their conquest broke to regimes. Both enemies ended entombed deep inside twisted halls, silent except for the ghosts howling down the stone. So you see Ysgramor's shadow stretches long, it's in the chilly echo whispering through Saarthal's excavated chambers. It is the salt clinging to Ingol's helm, and that lonely barrow it forms the deep foundation stones of Windhelm itself. His axe cries out for reassembly, even broken his ship feeds from feast below its Jorvisker roof. The land isn't passive. Skyrim holds on to the companions, their blood binding, their blade snapping against elven mail, their painful choices trapping half-dead dragon priests like insects under tormented rubble. This isn't just history, it's the land itself groaning under the weight of their passage. Touch the stones, smell the ancient air, walk their paths. The 500 companions, they never truly left this country, is their reliquary. Every step you take stirs their dust richer than any dreamer goal. The man beneath the stone, Ysgramor's burden. You think you know Ysgramor, harbinger, conquer, founder, stone fist of the north. But carve away the saga inscriptions for a moment, forget the gleaming statues, look closer, see the man who bore the crushing weight of legend long before it hardened into myth. That man started in a place very different from Skyrim's shores. I shepherd a shattered hopes before Skyrim meant refuge, was a desperate gamble whispered on frozen wines. Atmora was breaking civil war, maybe climate gnawing at the bones of the land. We rarely picture him there, do we? In the icy cradle before everything, he wasn't just a warlord then, he was our gathering point, the man chosen because others saw steel in his soul, not just strength in his arm. Imagine him in the smoky halls grappling with impossible choices. Which families cram on to those storm-worthy ships? Which hearths get left behind to the cold? It wasn't just logistics, it was tearing apart lives entrusted to him. His bows, ogre, and young Ingol. They weren't just heirs. Think of Ilger, first oldest, learning the ropes at his father's elbow, the quiet understanding as they surveyed the straggling lines of exiles, and little Ingol, bright-shade fierce, soaking up his father's words, his heroics, Ysgramor's authority. Then wasn't mere command, it was binding desperate folk to each other, whispering survival through clenched teeth as the sea ghost groaned beneath them. He held us together not just as a leader, as a stubborn shepherd, refusing to lose a single sheep to the merciless waves that charisma was forged before Skyrim to the night that broke the world. Then Saarthal, imagine that peace, fragile hard one, building crude shelters over alien ruins, daring to hope. And then the savage shock, the betrayal erupting in the dark. You can feel his world shattering, can't you? Not just the screams, the fire, Ingol, his bright spark snuffed out, gone, vanished into the murderous chaos, the failure, the sheer soul-scraping agony of the protector who failed, that pain carved itself deeper, and any blade, the escape, cold, brutal calculation etched into every thought that seaworthy craft leaving most behind wasn't just strategy, was choosing which kind of death your people face, slaughter now or possibly drowning later, taking Ilger. That was his sole anchor to sanity. One son, left one living fragment of the world had thought he was building, plunging back into the terror of the sea ghosts, with that howling grief echoing louder, and the storm not fleeing weakness, fleeing to consume heat, for the frozen furnace of his rage, trauma, and fury fused into one, driving him back to the frozen heart of a dying homeland. The grieving refugee vanished. He became something else, a vessel, filled only with the bitter frost of vengeance. Three forge of fury, the harbinger rises back in the brutal landscape of Atmora. Unrest, he didn't just rally warriors, he forged them into an instrument. The harbinger wasn't just a title he took, it was the persona he became. He fed the 500 on a shared feast of righteous fury and sacred pledge, retribution for the fallen honor debts demanded, and spilled Elven blood, and below it all the sweeter lure whisper, new lands, a home. One cleanly, he knew our pride, he knew our brittle fierce honor. He wielded it like a master, or Saarthal, that cry. Bon, willing killers to his soul-shaking purpose, looked closely at the war that followed, pure berserker spirit, no cold, sharp calculation. Lay beneath, observe it, pitting gnawed strength against the cloistered cunning of the Falmer, chasing them into their shadowed valleys, exploiting their isolation, maybe turning shattered reach tribe against tribe, a relentless strategist using the very fury he stoked as a weapon, focusing it like a hammer blow. The companions were his iron fist, but his mind was the smith who forged it. Command for decades, every decision carried the ghosts of Saarthal, every tactical retreat tasted like fresh betrayal, every loss felt like another piece of his own humanity offered up to the altar of vengeance. He sacrificed his softer self day by bloody day. Ogre, was he there at his father's shoulder through the worst battle, sharing the burden, or did he to finally fall, leaving Ysgramor truly alone? The sagas rarely whisper that blow, only the scars deeply dug into the father's weathered face, and at any answer for the loneliness of the mountain king. And then the war ended, they won, but a conqueror doesn't build a nation easily. Skate's breath still rattling his lungs, he stood in the great stone shell of Windhelm Palace of the king's harbinger must become hiking. The war leader now sat on a throne carved from conquered land, establishing laws, felt strange lest the potent fury of vengeance, more the grinding necessity of order. He invoked old Atmora, the circle traditions, on orchids binding us together again, but this time not with desperate hope or roaring, rage with precedent, with rules settling scarcity and grudges. This was the fading, the isolation. Legends don't confide, legends don't show weakness. Who does the warrior-king truly talk to when the war is done, and the companions look upon him with a not brotherhood? His victories were cities of stone ghosts, Saarthal rebuilt over blood and sorrow. Forever echoing Ingles laugh died too young, haunted, oh profoundly his motivations ripened slowly beyond just blinding vengeance. The deep, quiet battle now was security, building walls so sturdy no child like Ingol would ever be butchered in their sleep, making a homeland worthy of all the agonizing sacrifice. He built it strong, he built it lasting. His final days did he feel the damp moss thickening on the stones of Windhelm's Hall of the Dead, even as he lived, knowing his own rest place awaited within the profound weight of it finally settling. He had founded a people, shaped a nation, given us our soul, his personal cost, everything, his losses, his warmth, his simple joys. They were the hidden stones beneath the foundation of Skyrim. Ysgramor, the man, is obscured by the blinding glare of Ysgramor, the legend. He carried his sons, his failures, his monstrous rage, and his quiet, crushing loneliness. Right into that tomb we remember the Parthenax Bonthranen, the axe raised high, that glance back, see the depth in his eyes before the final shadows closed. And he wasn't just the architect of our destiny. He was the man who paid for every stone in Windhelm's walls with pieces of his own heart. That's the weight of a kingdom on your shoulders. That's the true cradle. Skyrim was rocked in brutal necessity, relentless duty, and the quiet echoing sound of a father's grief in the howling wind. That was Ysgramor, not just the hero. The man war wasn't some simple raid across the water, my friend. This was conquest, reclaiming everything, bone by blood-soaked bone. Atmora wasn't just grieving its lost children, it was roaring, and Ysgramor, he channeled that roar into a blade aimed straight at the heart of Skyrim. He called for companions, not just warriors, but a brotherhood forged for a single brutal purpose. 500 doesn't sound like much for a continent, does it? But you forget 500 legend makers, the hungry, the furious, the dispossessed sons of shattered clans. Across Atmora, answered Jeek of the river mouth, your shield splitter names whispered with awe, but then just teeth in the coming storm, forging that legion. That was his first stroke of genius. He didn't demand fealty to old tribal banners, only to the axe, to the vengeance owed Saarthal. To him he made them one-fist. Logistics wins wars as much as courage, my friend. Think of the scale, 500 sets of steel plate mail and shields, not scavenge junk, purpose-made in the frozen forges along Atmora's coast. 500 bellies to feed, not for a season, but for war. Shalong, mountains of salt, fish smoked dark as night, barrels of fresh water tighter than a drum, and the ships of the ships. Ysgramor's gift, father's wisdom. They weren't sleek traders. They were floating castles, hulls reinforced like cliffs, decks built for war. He grabbed every seaworthy hull he could find, bent them to his will. The sea hound, a tough old corsair, they say, toss her figurehead, strip her frivolities, make her a beast ready to vomit forth death. But his sharpest weapon, knowledge, hope, was a fool's gamble. He needed cold hard facts. What survived our slaughter were any humans left broken and hiding. How strong were the snow elves, their holds, their leaders, traitors, who dare the southern routes after the foe were dragged before Ysgramor. Fishermen blown off course, every rumor, every whisper about weaknesses, strategic passes, treacherous ground where the Falmer kings held power. He hoarded it all. Maps were etched not just on seal height, but scorched into his mind. He knew the shadow He was sailing into even. The light within it was vengeance. Saarthal's broken ribs were still bleeding memory into the ice when he chose his landing. That itself was the signal, a ghost ship returning to its murder site, not a sneaky cove knot. Some hidden bay right onto the cursed shore, where his kin froze in fire-shock thunder, and a shout to the entire Palisgand host, "We remember we are here." The Falmer, stunned or too confident, didn't marshal. Mistake the companions poured off those death ships like spilled tar, viscous and unstoppable. The taste of that first victory still carries on the northern wind. Blitzkrieg, you might call it less a campaign, more a wildfire, whipped by a gale. Vulnerable outposts, annihilated trading villages along the coast, fisher huts clinging to ice, gone before the smoke from the burning of Saarthal's ghost. Even cleared no prisoners worth the trouble. By the time scattered Falmer warriors flatter into a shield-wall, Ysgramor was already turning the knife. He needed a beating heart, not vengeance, a stronghold. His eye fell on a high bluff commanding a white river's bend, defensible, dominant, near the sea-for resupply, but far enough inland to force the enemy uphill. They didn't build Windhelm, and they fortified it. The stone foundation was already standing, ancient and cold. Old bones repurposed. His men threw up rough walls atop it, while others kept the Falmer spears at bay. The palace of the kings wasn't a palace, and it was a command post, an armory, a final redoubt dripping with meltwater and fresh blood. Securing the White River wasn't irrigation, was the lifeblood, the artery control, at water control. The valley supply barges snaking up from the coast, scout slipping out unseen, it became the anchor. No blizzard, no Falmer ambush could shift the clean thunder of landing. Faded quick, the Falmer kings shook off the surprise. They didn't offer open battle on the plains. Why should they? This was their land, carved in stone. Older than men, they retreated into their mountain citadels, beehives carved into rock faces you'd swear were unscalable, into their dark forests, where every root threatened to trip you. Every glade became a killing ground, swept by arrows you never saw coming, down into shadowed valleys choked with mist, places where the sun seemed afraid to go. Sieges ground down to spirit like a millstone, starving out elves dug into mountains. Was the work of years, of generations, perhaps, and stones drop from above, shattered flesh and bone as effectively as any axe blow. The companions bled for every foot gain. The forest became nightmares. Falmer didn't hold lines, they melted. Strike at dawn from whispering trees, take an unwary scout screaming into the undergrowth. Before the camp stirred poisoned barbs, pit traps lined with ice-licked spikes. They possessed magic beyond our ken entirely. Whispers, only illusions, warping the snow-hazed paths. Voices mocking in the gale frost that bit deeper than steel. The forgotten veil, Blackreach friend. Those names were on the first maps. They were the terror places, the whispered threats. Scouts brought back pale and shivering spots on the map marked with red ochre, meaning avoid or annihilate. Logistics became the war within the war. You think organizing 500 in Atmora was hard, keeping hundreds fed, armed, and driven leagues deep in enemy territory year upon frozen year. Winter in Skyrim doesn't care about destiny, it just kills. Supply lines stretched like frayed rope, every wagon train ambushed, every pack train lost in a blizzard gnawed at the effort. Wounded filled the crude infirmaries in Windhelm's growing shadows, screaming or silent not everyone's spirit was. Ysgramor's unbreakable will descent as a rust that sets in on idle swords, old tribal feuds, stirred beneath Aldmeri bruises. Why is he favoring Jeek as Kjar getting the toughest battles, the spoils, and fairly divided? Ysgramor beat this back not just with his presence, but with purpose shared, hatred, shared hardship, and shared plunder. From the holds they cracked open, taking the elves' own granaries, their forges high in the mountains, their herds turning the conquered land itself into the engine of liberation. Jeek a hammer, they said, breaking charge after charge with sheer ferocity. Kjar clever, at one master of the mountain flank, finding goat paths where the elves thought no one walked. His men scaled impossible cliffs to drop behind barricaded gates. They were his sword arms. The Falmer heart had to break pieces, wouldn't do a decisive pivot, not one battle, but campaigns within the campaign, shattering their main armies, guarding the fertile rift valleys, breaking their sacred places, temples roofed not with timber, but with the living mountain itself, where their priests chanted to alien gods, spilling that blood silenced the chants. They got pushed back further, higher, deeper, always deeper down into the utter dark. Was it Ysgramor's strategic choice to drive them below, or simply the last desperate flight of a broken foe? Cornered history blurs the line, perhaps. The elves knew ways down. He hadn't even dreamed of searching ancient holes to realities would recall from the surface. Victory felt clean, the completeness of it let, so the nightmare trade ruled the stone and snow. But forever watch the dark places beneath. Skyrim wasn't empty wilderness, Dwemer cities, silver-gray and humming with gears nestled in the deepest mountains. They watched like cold stars, superior, unmoved by the squabbling of needs, or Falmer atop their roofs attempts to parley met with indifference or cool, impenetrable logic. Your surface war, our deep places, skirmishes flare near their borders, misunderstandings, provocations, frost, troll dens, Edith clearing rogue giants, wandering the passes, wolf skeppers rising with the blizzards. The companions adapted, becoming not just soldiers, but wardens of a harsh new kingdom. A nobleman defended by axe and shield must first break the walls with axe and shield. The rhythm change, the crushing grind of sieges gave way to the tense patrol, small detachments riding the borders, signing forts along newly declared holds. Falkreth white and Stonehack is sunk into the bulwark of an imperium reborn. The companions, they were no longer just warriors, bound by blood oath vengeance. They were the law, the shield, the axe that kept the peace unbroken. Ysgramor's vision hardened into geography. Windhelm ceased being a colossal fort, it became a capital. His loyal captains, they became jarls. War didn't forge Skyrim, the peace hammered out on elven anvils, tempered in Falmer blood, quench in the icy waters of survival. That was the conquest that truly held. They had come back, they had stayed from icy rage to imperial stone. That was Ysgramor's legacy. The axe doesn't just cut in the right hands, it builds or rebuilds stone upon frozen stone, memory upon memory, blood upon bone. Skyrim was ours again, earned, bought, imposed, name hell. Forever. Think about the weight of that axe in your hands, not just any axe. Wuuthrad, feel the cold metal, the runes whispering ancient hatreds. That's not just a weapon, it's the soul of Skyrim carved into steel. And it all traces back to one man, one ship, and 500 hearts burning with vengeance. Ysgramor and his companions. Their story isn't just history, it's the bedrock under your feet, the fire in every Nord's belly. Ysgramor didn't just conquer Skyrim, he forged what it means to be known. When you stand tall, refusing to bow, that's him. When you raise a horn of mead to Fallen, knowing they feast in Sovngarde, That's the promise. Carved by his companions' deeds he ascended. Didn't he became more than man, a god progenitor standing shoulder to shoulder with Shore himself, his essence unbreakable, will perseverance against impossible odds, and vengeance swift and terrible as a winter storm. Remember Saarthal, the night of terrors. That betrayal by the Snow Elves wasn't just an attack, it was the forgifier that hardened the gnawed soul, taught us trust your clan, revere your ancestors, rely on your own strength, and be wary, always wary of the outsider, that suspicion runs deep colder and the sea of ghosts born in the ashes of that night. Look around you, the very land screams their legacy. Those Jarls lordly over their holds, their power stems directly from Ysgramor's captains. They were the first claim stakers, hacking out territories with their axes, wind helms, kings. Their lineage flows straight from Ysgramor's bloodline. Conquest wasn't just victory, it was the divine right to rule, and the moot to gathering to choose a high king or queen. Listen closely, and you can almost hear the echoes of Ysgramor's war councils on the Jorvisker itself, deciding the fate of a newly won land. Then there's Wuuthrad. The companions aren't just a guild, they're the living, breathing heirs. Jorvisker isn't just a mead hall, it's a relical, a temple to the old ways. They keep the flame alive, polishing the warrior ideals in an age where swords are sheathed more often and drawn. They adapt, yes, but the core, that unyielding strength, that code of honor. To your companions pure, Nod, you see their symbols everywhere, hear them, feel them. Wuuthrad, its very shape is a curse against elves. Holding it isn't just wielding a weapon, it's gripping centuries of cultural memory, of hatred forged in fire and blood. That hatred isn't dead history, it fuels the fires of the Civil War now, when voices shout against the Falmer, when the cry Skyrim belongs to the Nords rings out. That's Wuuthrad's echo. Listen to the skalds in the taverns. Their songs aren't mere entertainment, they're scripture, the sagas of the 500 companions, sung over and over, generation after generation. They hammer home the values, courage, loyalty, vengeance, honor. They justify the past, making heroes of conquerors. Look at the stones around you, the massive defensive walls of Windhelm. The sturdy keeps, that architecture wasn't born from peace, it was born from the companions deeding fortresses in a hostile land. They were carving with their blades, and the Skyforge, it's more than a blacksmith's hearth, it's a spiritual center. His flames whispered to be kindled by the breath of Kine herself. Jorvisker resting on the actual hull of Ysgramor's ship. It's not just wood and stone, it's a physical manifestation of the myth, grounding the legend and the very earth of Wuuthrad. But this legacy, it casts a long shadow, doesn't it? A dark on that foundational story, the night of terrors. It's the poison in the well. The mere betrayal isn't just a tale, it's the justification for deep-seated fear, for hatred that simmers beneath the surface. Look at the grey quarter in Windhelm, the suspicion towards the Dunmer, the outright loathing for the Altmer, especially the Falmer. It's all rooted in that ancient narrative. The companions didn't just reclaim Skyrim, they cleansed it. Their success, their glorious conquest, became the ultimate argument. Humans are meant to rule elves. They are betrayers, dangers, to be contained or driven out. Skyrim belongs to the Nords isn't just a political slogan, it's a birthright claimed with blood millennia ago, echoing the companions' genocidal campaign is a heavy legacy, admirable. Absolutely, their perseverance against annihilation, their fierce loyalty, their unwavering honor in battle, these are the pillars of Nod's strength. But intertwined with it is this deep vein of intolerance, this traumatized memory that refuses to heal. It empowers us, yes, it gives us identity, unity, a fierce pride but it also constrains us. It whispers suspicion, fuels division, makes forgiveness feel like weakness. The companions forge. Skyrim shaped its soul with axe blows, but those same blows left scars that still bleed. Their shadow is long, encompassing both the glorious light of Sovngarde's promise and the deep stubborn darkness of ancient grudges. That's the true weight of Wuuthrad, that's the inheritance. Every note carries the snow. Elf shadow Falmer views on Ysgramor's invasion maintains a somber reflective tone tinged with ancient sorrow, and a scholar's quiet intensity forget the roar. From Sovngarde's silence, the triumphant horns of Windhelm look past the sagas carved in dragon bone. To truly understand the dawn you must listen to the quiet beneath the snow. You must hear the whispers trapped in ice, the lament echoing from shattered crystal. This isn't the Nod tale of cleansing flame. This is the story written in frostbite scars and broken promises. This is the Falmer perspective on Ysgramor's scourge, Imerith, land of snow and light before humans, before the heavy boots of Atmora stamped the earth. Skyrim belonged to us. It called it Merith, the land of snow and light. Don't imagine crude huts fighting the blizzard. Picture crystalline spires grown from glacier ice, refracting the auroras into cascades of color. Envision gardens where frost bloom petals shimmered with captured starlight, tended by artisans, chanting harmonics that coaxed life from the permafrost. Our magic wasn't about rending mountains. It was the delicate symphony of preserving warmth within absolute cold, of guiding light through eternal twilight. Cities pulsed like frozen geodes. Then the luminous jewel beneath the ice auftanned, its towers etched against the pale sun like white bone knives. Our realms weren't bound by crude borders chiseled on stone. He flowed with the glaciers, our communities connected by shared harmony with the land, by sacred springs whispering secrets, by ley lines humming with auric energy, decentralized perhaps to outsiders, but bonded profoundly. We were the children of the frozen sky, disciples of Auriel's enduring light, shaped by the purity and harshness of the ice. We observed the cycles of frost and saw the migrations of snow foxes and ice wraiths, understanding a balance the newcomers would never grasp. Then they came, the Atmorans. Their ships were behemoths crashing upon shores we only knew for silent pilgrimage. They smelled of brine and sweat and smoke, loud voices shattering the pristine silence. Saarthal wasn't just a settlement, it was a violation of festering wound dug into the sacred breast of our mother Merith. It felt like watching crude tools desecrate a masterpiece. Their presence vibrated wrongness against the Lansong curiosity, or perhaps a flicker disdain. It bloomed quickly, seeing their brutish ways, their clumsy survival tactics against a land we understood like our own breath. Fear that crept in later, fear not of their weapons, but of their growth. They multiplied like vermin amidst the snowdrifts, their settlements spreading like a stain. Their worship shore animal totems, the raw primal screams of warriors. There we sought harmony with the luminous spirit of the world. They seemed to court chaos, to shout their defiance against the very elements he revered. The clash wasn't just territorial, it was a fundamental dissonance tearing at the fabric of the world we knew. To the night of terror's defense, desperation, and the dark whisper, do you think we struck without reason? Do you believe cruelty is our sole heritage? The night of terror's nod. Sagas paint it as barbarism, from frozen earth and from the echoing halls of deep Mzentia left a different truth chills our memory. Fear wasn't imagined, it was palpable. Saarthal wasn't just growing, it pulsed with a dark, unfamiliar energy. It wasn't Nod ambition we feared most. It was whatever they found. Beneath Saarthal, vibrations travel through the bedrock, deep thrumming notes felt only by the most attuned mages of geomantic resonance. Something immense, something wrong, an artifact radiating power that scraped against our souls. The eye, perhaps we don't know its name, we felt its hunger. It tasted like the void made solid our attacks. Was it unprovoked? Was it aggression? Or was it a desperate act of preservation? Imagine a nest of volatile newcomers, oblivious to the land's sacred bones, sitting atop a wellspring of world-shaking power that couldn't possibly comprehend. They weren't tending fields, they were digging into the dark heart of things best left buried. Fear screamed through our councils. They will wake it, they will unleash it. What recourse? Negotiation with warriors who understood only axis strokes. The attack on Saarthal was a surgical strike. Remove the threat, protect the land, destroy the unstable element before it consume everything. Yes, there was blood, yes, there was fire, but it wasn't hatred. It was necessity. Perhaps some ancient doctrine whispered of elven supremacy justifying swift removal of the lesser kin. But the dread that artifacts, silent, menacing hum, that was the true catalyst. We struck before the avalanche buried us all. To call it genocide ignores the terror lurking under Saarthal. 3. The scourge unleash. The ice shatters. Ysgramor's return was a nightmare made flesh. The sagas sing of 500 companions from our high vantage points watching the ships blacken the horizon. It felt like the sky itself had turned against us. Their fury wasn't fire, it was a glacial storm made animate. They didn't just fight, they tore the land apart. Our delicate structures, honed over millennia to blend with the frost, pulverized beneath sledges and crude spales. Warriors who fought with calculated grace, weaving frost magic and crystalline spears, met with berserker rage and tactics that turn terrain into a butcher's yard. Their ferocity wasn't bravery, it was annihilation incarnate. The initial clashes were brutal. Our cities fell like melting ice sculptures. Urkenthan's crystalline spires, once channels of starlight, crashed into blinding shards. Alftan's serene terraces stained crimson and trampled sacred groves where we communed with ancient spirits burned to ash. Their onslaught was relentless, a tide of iron and hatred washing over delicate things. They weren't reclaiming territory, they were erasing us. As hope fled into the snow, the retreat became the only path, not cowardice, survival, a bitter choking necessity. He looked upon the land he loved, now choked with gnawed smoke and echoes of death. Where could we turn? The thought soured our hearts. The Dwemer, our ancient rivals, hidden in their mountain tombs. He knew their arrogance, their cold pragmatism, but compared to the surface annihilation, their deep halls offered a sliver of shelter. He crossed the threshold, seeking sanctuary from the firestorm above. We paid our price, oh, we paid it in full. The betrayal, the blinding, the slow, agonizing descent into darkness. This was the true cost of Ysgramor's vengeance. The scourge didn't just kill Falmer, remade us into monsters. The sanctuary became our tomb for scattered remnants and forgotten sorrow. Our civilization didn't just vanish, it was submerged, drowned in blood and darkness. What walks the depths now? The Falmer. They are pale ghosts of what we were, twisted, sightless, driven by base instinct, and the endless torment inflicted by the Dwemer's cruel bargain. They are the living consequence of the scourge, a monstrous wound left festering beneath Skyrim. But sometimes echoes linger, fragments in the forgotten veil, touched by Auriel's hidden sanctum. Perhaps a shred of our innate grace survives, or in Angarvan, where frozen figures hold relics of light, find a perfectly preserved frost bloom carving untouched deep in a glacial cave feel the impossible smoothness of impossibly cold crystal that was ours. That is us, the intricate patterns defying the cold, not primitive markings, a language of harmony. Lost is there a counter-narrative nod. Historians erased us, our libraries burned our voices, silenced only Ysgramor's roar echoes across the ages. But in the silence of the deep snows, in the mournful song of the wind through frostbitten pines, listen, hear the sorrow, hear the accusation. Our tragedy wasn't mere defeat. It was the deliberate, violent erasure of an entire understanding of Skyrim. We weren't savages waiting for cleansing. We were a people shaped by the ice guardians of a delicate balance, shattered by axes forged in a distant warmth we never understood. Our legacy isn't hostility, is the profound silence where once there was sung. It is the deep forgotten sorrow beneath the snow. Remember that when you next walk the plains of Whiter, the land remembers, the ice remembers. You remember, think about the first fires in Windhelm, not after the ships landed cold and aching, but later, when those who'd sailed with Ysgramor finally caught their breath. Imagine the hull, the smell of wood smoke and mead and old sweat, men and women nursing frostbitten fingers, staring into the flames. Someone would speak, just talk about a skirmish, how broader shield biter held the ice pass for hours. Ironska death touch loosed an arrow that pierced to Falmer through the eye. Raw things, closed things, the dead name aloud remembered. That's where it started. Every night stories bloom like winter roses on the hearthstones. Bards listened sharp as knives. They soaked it in the rhythm of a shield wall, resisting the scream of the wind. The grunt as an axe found flesh that raw truth. It became song, necessary, powerful, like war cries carried through generations. Easier to remember a verse than a dry recounting, but think of transmission over hearthsides from winter spring to summer snow across mountains, and decades. Details stretched like soft leather, a holdout against 50 Falmer becomes 100 snipers, become armies. Courage becomes towering defiance. Can you blame them? The listener leans closer for the song, the image brighter, sharper, and life it resonates. One companion, maybe he took down 3 fierce fists, striking down. Next song 5 are swept away. Next with a single roared 10 crumple, until soon he felled 100 shadowed shapes. With one sweep the impossible made glorious. Necessary poetry. Heroes became something more. Ysgramor ceased being just a leader, a grieving man seeking vengeance. He became unwavering resolve made flesh. Heimskr 5 fingers. They stopped talking about his clever traps, maybe focused on that impossible. Gripped the crushing power in his shattered hand. Man blurred with a mythic ideal. They embody the gnawed soul, hardened land, break it. Permanently warrior spirit. 10 brutal entrants distilled into names by the fire. Then came Shalador centuries later. Powerful cunning. He saw the value in the wild stories, the fragmented songs. He gathered them, codified them, wrote down the songs of the return. Suddenly the myth of Ysgramor had an official scripture. His scribes smooth harsh knots. Remember, on Ysgramor smashed the proto-beer, wrenching the heart of a dying beast from the waste. Maybe the raw accounts spoke of starvation driving that desperate act. Shalador's song, it speaks of pure conquest over savagery. They lighted over entire savage campaigns, raids on peaceful Falmer, holding on to their last caves. Perhaps the War of the Crag became a saga of heroic rescue, not conquest turning bloody. The enemy flattened into implacable shadow. 8 devils, nightmares etched in stone. Complex wars became simple hymns, good axes against evil blades, necessary for unity, civilizing the chaos of reality and the companions themselves, they state, Jorvisker became power-proof stone, a testament. They became the guardians of their own legend, rituals hardened into holy motions, the inheritance choosing a worthy wielder for Wuuthrad. Echoes of passing the axe of Ysgramor itself, modern Greymanes tracing lineage back to Jorvasker's founding. Ysgrimson's axe of blood probably cuts in their veins. They were keepers of the flame, ensuring the legend's precise contours were honored and preserved within their walls. Then the nobles arrived, politics claiming power, demands emphasizing stature. How better than blood? Old Hjormund and Windhelm ruling with iron, he traced his house back low, and behold, a direct line descended from Ysgramor himself. Others look at the great families waving banners generations old. They pluck companions' names from the songs like ripe fruit, a shield. Rather hear a valiant hunter. There suddenly rulership isn't just land or coin, it's ancestral right baked into the oldest song. Skyrim knows it solidified thrones on bedrock myth and against outsiders. When the elves threaten, whether ancient Dwemer remnants or the haughty Altmer crossing the pass, the companions were the shield that held. They carved the land pure with their axes. Remember the treachery, remember the victory. That old fear of elves, the cornerstone of the original return, stirred a new shouting about Ysgramor. United the holds set their jaws firm. We shattered elf princes once. It can stop their dominion. Descendants returning. This wasn't just history. It was a living cultural weapon against any who'd challenged the Nords, claimed to their beloved peaks and valleys. It built walls where the ramparts crumbled. Fast forward to now, walk Jorvasker's med-scented porch. Listen to the clang of practice yards. Do they fret over ancient glories? They live them in a way, honoring traditions forged in the crucible of myth. When giants stomped towards Whiterun, did they invoke mere soldiers? The companions faced worse at Forlhost, when werewolves or whispers of them pressed close from the woods. Remember Wuuthrad, remember shields on the Eldgermot. The old legend flexes, slides into new threats, offers backbone. When reality looms darkly, it motivates, inspires, pushes a fist out against overwhelming shadow. Think of Ulfric standing before Windhelm, rallying men. What does he wield? The idea. Skyrim belongs to the Nords, her blood spilled for independence from elf lords, then from imperial purples. Now remember who took it first, who cleansed her soul, who planted the seeds of our bones. Ysgramor breath. The same mountain air stand here beneath his city walls. His echo resonates in the very stones of the rebellion, justifying separation and blood parsed long ago. Does it matter? The Falmer and the songs look nothing like the blinded husks crawling in black reach. Probably not. Does the true count of the 500 remain fog-shrouded, irrelevant? The weight of Ysgramor isn't in clan rolls or dusty cairns. It's the spirit he names, unyielding against the frost, unbreakable against invaders, hard as glacial ice. Skyrim personified when a gnawed bug gets slapped in the coal for the first time. He hears sagas endure when a farmer pulls his axe off the wall, unsure if bandits approach. He feels saga-like bonds. Brotherhood endures. They are pillars carved not from Tamrielic stone, but from the bedrock of belief, historical truth that pales before the necessity of the legend. He ceased being a man long ago. Ysgramor became the North Star burning through blizzard darkness. He became Skyrim's first fiercest battle cry, echoing forever across the throat of the world. Why care about mortal details when the spirit endures? Why break the vessel? Immersion lies in its undeniable power, always surging forward.